Dear Venerable Sisters and Brothers, Dhamma friends, today also we are going to start this Dhamma talk. As a consent of everything, you may all 3 times say sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tasse bhagavatu arahato samma sambuddhasse. Namo tasse bhagavatu arahato samma sambuddhasse. Namo tasse bhagavatu arahato samma sambuddhasse. Sankara bhikkhave anatta, sankara bhikkhave atta abhavissung, sangvatti sankaraya abadaya sangvatti yungti ti. Dear Dhamma friends, along this particular sutta known as Ananta Lakkana Sutta, for the last 9 days, we were dealing with materiality as an aggregate, the feelings, perception, and gradually we are getting the opening for the 4th aggregate known as Sankhara in Pali, and in general terms it is being traditionally translated as volition, mental volition. But today we are lucky, we have many other nuances, many other suggestions due to meditators, their experience they add into the literature. So first we will try to understand this, the word meaning of sankhara. So as far as it is in English medium, it is definitely accepted that there is no single synonym or single equivalent word. Instead, there are a lot of suggestions are there. And the same workers trying to find a single word, they find not only in English, even in Pali meanings, even in Sinhala, the Sankhara has many representative ideas or nuances or shades of meaning throughout the Buddhist canon in Tipitaka. And whenever we try to understand with respect to that background, it gives kind of a practical, pragmatic meaning. And when you try to understand under another context, yet another shade of meaning, likewise we have to patiently try to understand according to the occurrence of this particular word in the Tripitaka or in the Sutta Pitaka. The most famous place is the Sankhara appearing in the dependent origination in 12 aspects. Avijja Paccha Sankhara, Sankhara Paccha Vijnana, ignorance or darkness as a proximate factor, the sankhara bound to arise, and whenever the sankhara going to happen, it produces vijnana, the consciousness. So it is playing in between the ignorance and the consciousness. So the traditional interpretation, it says, this idea is more related with the karma and karma theory, that is, good begets good and bad begets bad. So therefore these sankhara, they categorize as punyabhi sankhara, apunyabhi sankhara, aninjabhi sankhara. Whenever performing towards the meritorial side or good side, beautiful side, it is called punyabhi sankhara, that is good, meritorious. And the opposite of is apunyabhi sankhara, that is demerits, the bad things you do with your volitional involvement, conscious contribution, that is called apunyabhi sankhara. And there are some other kind of activities which is not falling into good or the bad, or merits or demerits, that is called aninjabhi sankhara. Likewise, our all activities in a sentient life could be divided into Punyābhi Sankara, Apunyābhi Sankara, Aninjābhi Sankara. So this is very sensitive, very touchy subject towards religious life. In traditional countries, the Buddhist countries, even they are not much worried about the deep philosophy of the teaching. They are much concerned about whether they are doing meritorial deeds or demerits, that kind of thing. So therefore, all the religious masters in a traditional way try to stimulate people, followers, towards the meritorial deeds rather than the demerits. So therefore, they have to learn this word sankhara, that is punyābhi sankhara. So that is one occurrence. And yet another place it says kaya sankhara, vaci sankhara, mano sankhara, and they are the bodily functions, verbal functions and the mental activities are concerned. The bare minimum representative of the bodily action is known as kaya sankhara. The bare minimum representative of the vaci sankhara, the verbal action are called vaci sankhara, and bare minimum activities of the mentality or consciousness, awakeness, the mind in general terms, known as chitta sankhara. So, in meditation specifically, when you are referring to Satipatthana Sutta or Anapanasati Sutta or Girimananda Sutta, they are the Buddha give a pathway along the Kaya Sankhara, Vaci Sankhara, Mano Sankhara, how this sensuous or external faculties, when the consciousness is connected with the external faculties, eye and the visual objects, ear and the sounds kind of, and the impingements, how this Kaya Sankhara is working, and when it is become subtle and subtle, when it's little away from the sensuous contacts, but still you awake under such circumstances, how the Kaya Sankhara is changing, and Vaci Sankhara, the verbal functions, verbal activities are changing, and the Chitta Sankhara is very interesting. It is like if you take a whole mind as a globe, from the superficial layer we call as, it is known as the sensuous activities, and we get into the deep and deep and deep, it is leaving aside the sensuous world, come into the kind of one-pointedness and the concentrated and collected, fall calm and collected, and they are how these Kaya Sankhara, Vaci Sankhara, Mano Sankhara, the physical, verbal and mental deeds are related with this somewhat concentrated mind, and then ultimately when the mind is completely emancipated, when the mind is completely liberated, how along the bodily activities, verbal activities, mental activities, one can relate to this such a liberated mind. This is also one of the pathways, so therefore you can understand yet another aspects, yet another facet of formation, mental formation, in terms of Kaya Sankhara, Vaci Sankhara, Mano Sankhara. And other times it says, Sabbe Sankhara Dukkha, Sabbe Sankhara Anicca. These are also very commonly recited and used terms that indicates all the mental formations or volitions are transient, and it's bold statement, they are all leading to suffering. So therefore, if you go for Punyābhi Sankhara, as we introduced first, the meritorial activity, demeritorial activities, or indifferent kind of whatever it may be, it is leading to suffering. It is leading to infliction. That is why the Buddha here mentioned, Sankhara bhikkhave Anatta, Sankhara Atta Abhavissung, Sankhara Ne Sankhara Abadaya Sangvatteyum. If Sankhara is, Buddha says, bold statement, it is beyond your control. If at all it has, the Sankhara has any essence, any governability, it will never lead to infliction. And this is a kind of very interesting aspect on a philosophical level, and in the deductive knowledge, and of course we will deal in talks in future. Buddha was the very first one to declare whatever you do volitionally, whatever you do with your will, everything is leading to infliction. Everything is leading to suffering. Everything is leading to this influx. So the transient nature. So therefore, look at these all volitional activities, look at all your willful activities, conscious activities, is a kind of an aberration, kind of eccentric, kind of abnormal. So when and where you perform such a thing, if you have that notion, you can have completely your activities from a different point of view. It's very interesting when we are observing Sankhara from the Vipassana point of view, from the inside point of view, share the generally accepted fact that all the Sankharas are, all the volitional activities are leading to impermanence, all the volitional activities are leading to suffering and inflicting. So that is a kind of a challenge for any person who is thinking about the positive thinking, productivity, creativity, progress, that kind of thing, and how the teaching of the Buddha we can compare towards with this each and every volitional activity is suffering. So that is whenever someone is going to compare it and deal with, it will be a big study how such a world we are living in, we are thinking about and prescribing about this productivity, creativity, progress and all the kind of thing. But the Buddha, silently he says, anything you do willfully, anything you do volitionally, anything you do consciously, it is at last working against your pleasure, working against your happiness, working against your contentment. And therefore, when and where you perform such a thing, better be alert, aware, vigilant and diligent to see this relationship. But I think it is it's a radical kind of a difference in one's attitude must be there. So that is one aspect, that is to say, the bold statement, Sabbe Sankhara Anicca, Sabbe Sankhara Dukkha, that all the volitional activities are inflicting. And there is yet another way when we are dealing the particular sutta that we have taken for this, taken as the topic of this series of talks. There are 5 aggregates, the materiality or corporeality as an aggregate, or feelings as an aggregate, perception as an aggregate. Here also the sankhara appear as an aggregate, comprising 5 aggregates, and the next one is the consciousness. So we can look at sankhara as an aggregate also. So these are the literally 4 shades, 4 basic occurrence in the Tripitaka. So each and everyone is going to give different facets of sankhara. So I would like to take out of these 4 how we can relate this kaya sankhara, vachi sankhara, mano sankhara, the bodily functions, verbal functions and the mental functions change, undergo evolution or metamorphosis whenever someone is going deep into meditation, specifically in Vipassana meditation. But of course, when we are discussing, when we are analyzing the mental formations, how it changes, how it undergoes the evolution in meditation, of course not limited to Vipassana. It is addressing both concentration meditation and Vipassana meditation. And at the beginning, it's a very strategic way. The Buddha says, if you wish to understand Sankhara, you have to understand it works in three ways: physical way, verbal way, and mental way. And as a beginner, the Buddha recommends always you must start with physical activities, physical functions, and that is because that is tangible, that is gross, and that is easy for the undisciplined mind, unmindful mind to start with. So therefore, out of 4 foundation of mindfulness, first he prescribed Kaya-nupassana, and as far as the Sankhara also, his first presentation is Kaya Sankhara. And the Kaya Sankhara, if you little define it, all the bodily activities, okay, we can say physical behavior, but the deeds, all are, we can say Kaya Sankhara, the activities of the body. But when we are going to meditative sphere, it says the bare minimum of the bodily activities. The intrinsic minimum bare bodily activities for your life to continue. So that has been attributed to in-breath and out-breath. The Buddha says, if your body to continue your life existence, the bare minimum necessary is the breath. Whenever the breath is there, then only that can give the opening for all the activities. So therefore, the Buddha strategically asks us to observe the breath. And Satipatthana Sutta or in Anapanasati Sutta, you can say, Sato asasati, sato passasati, that is mindfully, you take in-breath, you take out-breath. And then you observe carefully the behavior of the breath, when and where the atmosphere is not disturbing and conducive for you to keep the breath face to face with. So therefore, as I mentioned in the early talks, you have to use your common sense so that less and less distractions, and you try your best to keep the breath face to face. When we are keeping the breath face to face, the Buddha says, if the factors are conducive, if the factors are supportive, and if you give the conducive conditions, the breath becomes subtle and subtle. So that is another kind of suggestion he brings. Long in-breath and out-breath becomes short in-breath and out-breath. And then you can clearly understand whether this breath is a forced breathing or it is automatically happening. Of course, at the level of long in-breath and long out-breath, short in-breath and short out-breath, the meditator, the beginner may confused thinking, am I doing forced breathing or it is natural breathing? But whatever it may be, you must understand the suggestion, standard recommended suggestion of the Buddha, let it be natural. Don't interfere with, so that you are not volitionally get involved in the breath. So that is very crucial. So how much you have to familiarize your posture, how much you have to familiarize the surrounding, how much you have to familiarize the breath, and then to make sure it is something happening. So this is important. Even if you are doing, for example, the Maha system, rising and falling, if you are, over-enthusiastic, if you are chasing for results, naturally you feel like forcing the breath in order to make it prominent, in order to make it make a driving force. So much so, you are disturbing your sankhara, you are disturbing your willful connection, and therefore you must withdraw yourself in the gross level, your egoistic idea, your volition, your desire or any conceit, you just let it happen. So that itself is a kind of a let go. That let goism, at the beginning you have to understand with the breath. And in the out of sankhara, context of sankhara, you can say, you must always appreciate natural breath. So that even then you are appreciating, even you know it, sometimes the forced breathing can happen, but never get worried about, never discourage, you let it happen. When it is calming down, in order to keep the attention, the mindfulness, the vigilance, you try to penetrate as closely as possible, as immediately as possible to the breath, so that all the other distractions will be less, having less impact, less turbulence, so you will be penetrating into. When you are penetrating into the breath, in the sense you can experience the breath in terms of its elementary characteristic, like earth element, fire element, water element, liquidity kind of thing. That is what it does. That is what it means. You are penetrating into. When you are penetrating, make sure that breath is quite natural. It is happening just for the utility value. You are not running, you are not planning, you are not thinking. No any necessity, just to maintain, just to continue your life continuum. So much when it is reducing, the Buddha used the word sankhara. Passambayang kaya sankharang asasisamiti sikkati. He says, now the yogi understand, due to his common sense, he reduced the external distraction, presented or penetrated the mind, or mindfulness into the in-breath and out-breath. And when that happened, you can see, you can understand the bare minimum bodily activities in order to maintain the life continuum or your being. So ultimately you will go to very subtle breath. Sometimes you may entertain fear, may I die? May I go for paralytic strokes? Because the breath is becoming so subtle. And when that happens, the Buddha says you must discipline yourself, restrain yourself, calming down the breath body, calming down the life continuum. You must meditate in such a way you can go to very deep layers. So when that happens, your volitional contribution or any thinking, any contemplation, any daydreaming, any fantasizing, everything is going against this discipline. So therefore you must try to not to facilitate that kind of thing. Even such a thing happen, main thing is not to worry, let it happen, let it calm down, so that you can see just mere continuity of your existence, your life continuum, or the just being. So, to come up to that level, to the bare minimum activities, bodily activities, just to maintain the life continuum, it's a very subtle balance, very subtle equanimity, equilibrium. So you have to train slowly when happen. But if your mind is not well trained, if your mind is not prepared, often the fear come and disturb the turbulence. Or sometimes, due to too much of calming down, mind slip away to sleeping. Or sometimes the doubt may come and cross your this thing. So these are the pitfalls. So it is not a mistake of the yogi, that is the way it happens, because we have never experienced our life continuum such in a subtle, pure form. We are always with complexities, doing this and doing that and thinking fast, thinking future and planning and all the kind of thing. Now you are peeling off one by one and try your best to go into the deep layers. When it is happening, even if you are successful in achieving that, there's a kind of agitation in the mind, kind of unpreparedness in the mind, kind of uncertainty in the mind is going to come. So these are the best definition of kilesas, definition of defilements. They prompt to come up. Whenever the mind goes to very deep layers, the defilements are going to happen. So whenever it happens, there are two ways you may work with it or react with it. At the time, you may get ashamed and humiliated about your defilements. Or otherwise, you may appreciate it. Now you see, who am I? What am I? Whenever the bodily activities calm down to the bodily sankhara, kaya sankhara, calm down, then only bubbling starts. So therefore, preparedness must be there. Keep the bodily activities as at the low ebb, as much as possible. Let this automatic thing to happen. So when this automatic thing happens, some people develop feelings. Some people going to work with past memories and communication and perceptual disorders. Some people go and do manipulations under such circumstances, the creative thinking. So therefore, when and where the bodily functions go to a very subtle low ebb, three kind of personality traits can come. Feeling type, perception type and the volitional type. So that no one can understand, no one can predict, no one can read unless otherwise you go to this very concentrated, calm and collected mental state. So when that you manage to go up to that level, when the manifestation happens, sometimes you get kind of unrelated feelings. Body is swaying, the creatures are crawling up and down, and you feel like needles are running up and down, and sometimes like getting benumbed and stiffness. All the kind of feeling can happen. Some people start to feel past memories, dead relatives, and the Deva, Brahma, all the kind of thing can happen. Yet another people will start to say, it is just I am looking, what about I am thinking about Sabbe Dukkha, Aniccan Dukkha Anatta, and they start feeling like introducing some kind of contemplation. Or some they feel like, what about thinking about the repulsive nature of my head, body hair, head hair, and all the kind of thing they try to put into this pure form, thinking it is a good merit, thinking it's a very efficient way of practice. But all these things make turmoils, unwanted turbulence for this very calm down situation. So therefore, when you go there, one or the other thing will come. Nothing to worry. Accordingly, there are some personality traits also. Some people are more inclined to the feelings. Some people are more inclined to perception. Some people are more inclined to creative thinking, or sometimes maybe future plans or that kind of thing, or otherwise contemplating on what the Buddha mentioned as meditative objects. All the kind of thing happen. So you must be vigilant, you must be diligent, you must be prepared to see them as not me, not mine, not myself, but not to reject it or not to entertain it. So if I am to refer to the yesterday's talk, the Buddha mentioned when and where this mental proliferation is going to happen, out of these feelings, out of this perception, or out of this your volitional activities, there's a huge connectedness, huge relationship to you. Therefore you, unless otherwise you are experienced, unless otherwise you are prepared, you naturally tends to proliferate them and think them and entertain them. Then when and where you try to entertain them or take delight of them or incline to them, they grow in such a way, it will overwhelm you and you will forget about that you are meditating or your main object is in-breath and out-breath, and ultimately you will be in daydreaming, fantasizing and taken for a ride. So therefore, early meditators, those who are reaching that state for the first time, feeling, perception or volition, one or the other thing will come, and unpreparedness make them to taken for a ride, keep on thinking, keep on proliferating, and these, the very analytical power, the very so-called wisdom arising at that time is hardly you can see whether it is direct touch or just a concept, or just the imagination, or hallucination, or just a mind made. Because it is coming out of this direct touch of one-pointedness. But the happening what is, your mind take the chance and keep on proliferation. So ultimately you will be overwhelmed by it. So therefore, when you get up, your mindfulness will be eroded, washed off. Your concentration will be washed off. You will be completely deranged from the primary object. Ultimately, you don't know whether you are wake up from a dream or you are a meditator. So, in order to not to have that kind of misdirections, Buddha says, Passambayang kaya sankharang asasissamiti sikkati. At that time, you must meditate in such a way, calming down your breath body. Don't entertain any suggestions coming from the feeling, perception and the volition. Of course, what does it mean by feelings? It's a broad subject. What does it mean by perception? It's a broad subject. What does it mean by volition? It's a broad subject. And that you can understand when we are taking part in the interviews. When the people come down to that state, they take one or the other off-roads and keep on proliferating, keep on fantasizing, keep on daydreaming, and ultimately go and say, am I progressing or am I regressing? Definitely one can say off the track. Best thing is to come back to the primary object. Of course, the practical problem is by the time no primary object. There is nothing to perceive. No place, no pattern of in-breath and out-breath, no heat, cold, stiffness and tension. So therefore, only your path and the mindfulness of your mindfulness on the path is the only refuge. So always you must refer back to the path you came up to that level. Never entertain any kind of these titillations. So in Sanya, the Buddha says, this is the deviation where even the slightest delight, even the slightest inclination, even slighting entering into that is enough. It will take you for a ride. For example, when the Buddha says that in the Pachalayamana Sutta to Venerable Moggallana, he was in a very deep meditation and he don't know he's nodding. The sloth and torpor is setting in. And repetitively it is happening. He can't get out of that, because when and where the mind situation is come to this collectedness, the congealing, the condensing of the mind happen and fall into sleep. Again he wake up and again going into that. And then the Buddha appear as if he is in the presence of him. He says, now if you wish to understand and to master this sleepiness, just see your perception. Are you appreciating this sloth and torpor, or you are ready to study it? If you are ready to study, you must have a radical mind, your radical reflection, how under such circumstances the sloth and torpor can undermine you. But if you never do it, if you have any inclination, what a nice thing to have a little nap at that time. Then you will be completely go for snoring and sleeping. So you have to nip it at the bud level. So in order to nip it at the bud level, two things must be coincide. Two things must be mastered. One thing is calming down the mind, calming down the breath body, and make the ground clear for this feeling, perception and volition to arise. And when and where arises, you have to understand your characteristic features in terms of feeling or perception or volition, and to be aware of it without losing the sight of your primary object, without losing the attention to the mindfulness, without losing your diligence, without losing your vigilance. So it is like tightrope walking. You are in a footbridge, now in the middle of the waterway, and it is shaking up. Not like just like at the bank. In the bank, the footbridge is established. When you go middle, it is shaky. So all the time, there's a rail, so you to handle. Otherwise, if you are going to look up and down, you will lose this thing, and now you are falling down to the cliff, not at the bank. So there you have to understand when and where the Passambhaya Kaya Sankarang, the breath body is calming down, so much of challenges happening. And to go off little track and to say, if you have no faith on the Buddha, if you have no moral integrity, if you don't have the healthy mental setup, this is the vulnerable place. You have to re-establish your faith. I am doing this. I have sacrificed everything and earned up to that level. I must not compromise this kind of endeavorance with the minuous objectives. It must be the ultimatum, altruistic thing. And the other thing is you must be mentally sound. And moral integrity, your responsibility on the moral shame and moral fear, daily must be brushed. Daily it must be brushed. Otherwise, as if you are going to do a brain operation in the kitchen. You must do brain operation in the fully specialized theatre. Don't play hell in the kitchen. Kitchen is whatever it may be, it is cleanliness, is not good for the brain surgery. So likewise, when and where you go to that level, you must be keep the outer and inner things very clear, very neat, and you must be very attentive and supply these things or facilitate these things at a very highly spiritual thing. Of course, you are attending to your body. Of course, you are attending to the surrounding, but consider this as a very spiritual, because you are not going to go to understand the sankhara in terms of bodily activities. When it's calming down, these things can happen. So if you manage to cut through, see through, then you will entertain the rapture and the pleasure. But if you are not managing, the fear can happen, monotony can happen, boredom can happen, sleepiness can come, entertaining of doubts can happen, your faith will be shaken, and you will be sweating, you will be challenged. And that is the way, after paying that much of cost, very rarely one person can see through, and when and where you see the balance, when and where you see the equilibrium, it is give the frills and thrills. Because you are managing your own situation, and ultimately you start to see you are now in a healthy and balanced mental state, even though you are not getting the orientation from the external sensuous object, the impingements, internally there is a balance happens. So that is, it is always is with you, but just you have to go in a systematic way. When and where you go there, daily you must refine it. Daily you must refine it, and then once you understand that bodily pleasure or rapture kind of thing, then you are meeting the second kind of sankhara, passambayam, chitta sankhara parisangvedi asasissamiti sikkati. Then I am following the series of the Anapanasati Sutta. After Priti and Sukha, the Buddha mentioned Chitta Sankhara Patisangvedi Asasissamiti Sikkati. Then you are clearly understand the Chitta Sankhara, the mental functions, or you are going into your brain. You are going into in the sense to the mind, and you can see now bodily functions and the internal impingements and the eye, ear, nose and all things are now very calm and quiet. Now under such circumstances, how the mind is working, and they are Chitta Sankhara, sometimes it is known as Mano Sankhara, is been attributed to two mental factors, feelings and perception. The mind represents completely in toto in terms of feelings and perception. So you are going into a sphere, there are a lot of feelings are there, lot of perceptions are there, they are unrelated. Just happening, just like in a dream world. So when and where happens, the same thing, you must disclaim them, you must not be afraid of them, or frightened by them, or assuming them, clinging, and getting into that, proliferating it. So when it is happening, one day you will learn the art how to calm down them, how to not to agitate them, how to settle down them. And first you will understand the Chitta Sankhara Patisangvedi, what are the mind for activities, mind functions. Theory, Chullavedala Sutta is telling mind functions are nothing but feelings and the perception. So when the feelings and perception happen, if you are going to meddle with them, if you are going to assume, if you are going to react, anything you can aggravate them. But not doing anything, just being, but fully vigilant, fully diligent, fully mindfulness, you will see just like the breath, they start to calm down. This is the second tetrad. It says the Vedananupassana, how you understand your feelings, your perception, how much it is mind-made. And if you are going to assume them as reality, if you are going to assume that as mine, me or myself, more and more you will get engaged with them and proliferation can happen. So therefore withdrawal from them, disavow them, disown them, and that is an art, not a science. So when you are withdrawing, not in the first day, second day, third day, 1001 times you have to do, and when the withdrawing, then Buddha says, Chitta Parisangvedi Asasissamiti Sikkati, then you can see the pure mind. The mind is not contaminated with external defilements. So Chitta Parisangvedi Asasissamiti Sikkati, Chitta Parisangvedi Pasasissamiti Sikkati. So you will see when you are peeling off an onion, if it is a red onion, early peels are reddish color. When you remove it, you go to more subtle, more pale, more white kernel, middle. And there, the reddish color is not there. Likewise, when you go to the Chitta Parisangvedi, it is totally free from 5 hindrances. No defilement. You can see it is like a white paper. And it has not been drawn anything. It's just like a clean blackboard or white paper. You can see there may be bubbles here and there coming. It is like a clear midsummer sky. Here and there clouds are going. but you can see bright blue sky. Whatever the clouds are passing, never smear, never defile the sky. You can see sky is far away, clouds are so close, it can cover temporarily, but they are two phenomena. So therefore, bubbles happening, or it is called blinks, blips, or sometimes they call gis, just happening here and there. And when and where they happen, our consciousness is trying to find the refuge, going to take refuge of these things happening, instead of the total tapestry, total canvas. So when and where it happens, now by the time consciousness has no anchorage, nothing to hang into, so therefore anything happen, it go in search of to hold them, cling them, and to incline into that. So that is the vulnerability of the consciousness. So yogi, the practitioner, must understand how much the consciousness is vulnerable when it is undefined. When it is fully defined, it has total identity, total functions, it has its own role, but when and where you are weaned off the defilement, slowly, the consciousness feel uneasy. It feel quite imbalanced. It feel like lost. When that happens, if the yogi is uninstructed, if the yogi is not prepared, he or she feel imbalance. As if I am in imbalance life, because you recognize with this consciousness. But the teaching of the Buddha is to wean it off from the defilements. But when it is weaning it off, for the first time in your life, first time in your samsara, the consciousness play all the tricky games. It try to find out something to hold into. So anything happen, it try to get it. Or otherwise, the mind create itself objects to grab into, because it is floating now. It has already volatile. So under such circumstances, if you can understand this, the crafty nature of the consciousness, the cheating nature, the perverted nature of the consciousness, you can see it can produce anything. If you wish, pleasure, unpleasure, certainty, uncertainty, recognition with that, and disown them, all things are possible. So only people have this bold understanding and radical reflection and understand the Buddha, they will never assume them, they will never recognize with them, they will try their best. Even the consciousness is try to take you for a ride. So it is a kind of, you are putting your hand to the bottom of your personality, bottom of your liking and disliking, and try to reshuffle everything. And therefore, when and where you go to such a situation, when you come out, you are not the same person coming out. So much of changes are happening, because you at that time you will understand whole your life, you try to amuse, you try to diversify, you try to varietal entertainment for the consciousness. Whenever you are going to wean it off, only you will really find what is your prime task is. So far you was fertilizing, so far you was giving enough food, so far you were giving varietal entertainment the consciousness, but the Buddha give instruction for you to wean it off, cut it off first with the bodily activities and then mental activities, and try to see what is the function of the mind, the consciousness. And at that time Buddha says, yancha cheteti, yancha pakappeti, yancha anuseti, tang arammanang hoti viññānassa titya. Any volition, any the little thinking, or any crafty idea, or any your undermining tendency, anything will give the foundation or stage for the consciousness to take stand. Everything is mental. Now it is as if you catch a bird and put into a cage, and the bird is now trying his best to escape, finding an opening. So therefore, for the moment, you are not supporting any bodily or sensuous any object. And feelings and perceptions also comes, but you try your best patiently not to assume them. Then the mind is coming out with different volitions, different will, different creativity, and all the kind of thing may get try to compensate the anchorage of the consciousness. So there you are studying how mind is making its own objects in the absence of real objects, and some or the other try to continue its continuity. It is, in a sense we can say, the consciousness has its own private agenda. You always, knowingly or unknowingly, support with your all work, sometimes with overtime work, to give the fertilizer for the consciousness. So whenever you try to give so much of fertilizer, so much of raw material, so much of inputs, ultimately the agenda of the consciousness will win. You are the loser and you have to suffer. That is the infliction. That is what the Buddha says. If you know, if you really have any compassion or well-being about you, rather than fulfilling the desire of the consciousness, rather than fulfilling the desire of the volition and will, rather than filling of your desire for your desired perception, desires feeling, desires materiality, you must understand the mechanism to whom you are fertilizing. For what you are fertilizing? Nothing but for your self-infliction, self-suffering. So therefore, Buddha has so much of compassion to the sentient beings. They are fighting each other to get more pictures, more sounds, more smells, more tastes, more comfort to the body, and more pet ideas. And ultimately they are engulfed with. And they claim, I am richer than the other person. I am well to do for that other person. So this is the simply Buddha says stupidity. This is what the Buddha says foolishness. This is what the Buddha says ignorance. This is what the Buddha says the darkness. Open it off, unveil it, and just cut through and see whenever you weaning off the consciousness, how much craft it is happened. So in the Dutya Cetana Sutta, in the Samyutta Nikaya and the Cetana Sutta, it says at that time, if the consciousness can't play the game, if you can't run the game because of lack of food, it prepare its own one in terms of volition, in terms of willful action. And ultimately it thrive upon that. This is the place, Vijnana Pacca Nama Rupa, Nama Rupa Pacca Vijnana. The Vijnana projects form and the name, and ultimately that itself is become a foundation for Vijnana to thrive. So they become reciprocal each other, and that is the most tricky point, Buddha says, understand in this cause-and-effect relationship. Whenever the Vijnana is cornered, it projects Nama Rupa, and ultimately that very Nama Rupa become a foundation for Vijnana to stay. But some philosophers, they argue, whatever the Nama Rupa projected by Vijnana never carries Vijnana. It's just a projection. This is something it's a food for thought. For example, when you are looking at your face in a very clear mirror, you can exactly see all the features of your face. But you know it is not living. It has all the features of living face. You can smile, the image will smile. If you are going to do any facial expression, it will show. But you know, definitely it is not living. And yet another thing, very interesting to see, our eye, it has the capacity to see shapes, external shapes. So I can see the whole world except the eye. I cannot see the eye. So therefore Vijnana never see its own shape by Vijnana. It has to deduce. You have to deduce the function of the Vijnana by its working, its functions. You have to understand how it works. So as if you wish to know your own eye, you have to get a reflection on it. Whole way you are going to live, never you can see your eye. So likewise, when the Vijnana is playing, at last, when desperately, it is take the refuge of Sankhara. That means willful action. You start thinking. You think, I am a great thinker. Each and every idiot is a great thinker. Each and every idiot is a great thinker. Every thinker is a great idiot. Except the Buddha. He only shows the thinking is the one you take refuge. Ultimately, you end up with the inundated with your own thinking, and you present it as a very great thinker. But the thinking is just a projection the mind takes when the other things are not available. Something like a realistic, materialistic impingements or any kind of imagination, the willful action happens. So, you must not, as a vipassana yogi, try to get rid of that. Impossible. Because we are whatever may be under the agenda of the consciousness. What you have to do is let them happen in the freelance basis and observe in such a diligent way, such a mindful way, without passing any judgment. Impartially you have to observe how the trick of the mind it is working. Slowly you are weaning off Kaya Sankhara, Vachi Sankhara, Mano Sankhara, and when and where it is going, how the consciousness is working. So who is looking at whom? Consciousness is looking at the consciousness. So they are such a tricky place. So only one observation will never give a fulfilled evidence. You have to observe 1001 times. Each time it play different tricks. Each time it play different perversions. So, but very intrinsic, very electric and very inspiring how much the mind is tricky. And you will never find such a tricky person outside. You are the most trickiest person. The mind is the most trickiest person. You can't think any outside person is more trickier than that one. Therefore, Venerable Katakunti Jnanananda, he says, I can't find anyone mistakes outside which I have not done for myself. It becomes mistake because you have done it. But when the outsider is doing, you accuse him and corner him and crucify him. But when you do it, you have so much of sympathy. You never see. You see, under these circumstances, this has to happen. But under these circumstances, when the other person is performing, you come with the ruler, measure it, and going to get the capital punishment, 5-year sentence, this and that. So that is the way the Vijnana is always self-justification. So the day you see it, you find that how much the sentient beings, without infliction from outside, he or she itself is inflicting enough. It's not necessary the second person to go and do anything. So therefore don't think about, everyone living in this samsara has their own fair share. Whether it's the king or the subject, doctor or the patient, teacher or the student, parents or the children, whatever it may be, that is the thing. But why the Buddha is so much emphasizing? Because only the human mind can see this junction. No any animal, no any other beasts, nothing, because we have come up to such a important, evolutionary important junction, where, of course with the instruction, of course with the preparation of the mind, of course with the success in the meditation, you can see how the mechanism is working. And the Buddha says, specifically at this juncture, the Buddha says, there is no medicine for that, just observation itself is the medicine. No one will believe, they will think there may be some injections or operations or any kind of a surgeries to get out of that. But the Buddha says, the dassana pahatabba, whenever you see the trick of the mind, you will never entertain magic shows. You understand, you are the one paying money and getting fooled. Why should you pay? Because it's a magic. It's a magic of the mind. So, when of course, we will come to the gradually to the consciousness itself. Today, I thought of sharing with this when the volitional activities, or some people put it in English jargon as fabrication. Mental formation, volitional activities, the will or fabrication, how much we fabricate when and where the mind becomes calm and quiet, when it is free from defilements, so much of fabrication happens. Ultimately, you will fall back to the same kind of trap, because consciousness can't live without defilements. Always it is creating. So, in the West, what they, not only in the West, East also can say, people thought, maybe after some kind of deductive knowledge or with the direct understanding, whenever the mind becomes calmed down, this all willful action, volition, is not due to me, but due to the omnipotent, omnipresent God. God is the one deciding this. So, even if you go to the deepest layer, the omnipotent, omnipresent God is working, and that is beyond my control. So therefore, what to do? We have to say, oh my, pray God, please save me. And that is what it happens. Analyzing this situation, the Bertrand Russell, he analyzed the Western psychology. He says, some contemplative meditators went to very deep layers and they find the panoramic thing, it happened without, you have no agenda, but it has its own agenda. In the Western, they call it intelligent design. That is the term they are using. And when you go to the intelligent design, working in such a way, wherever you go, whenever you go, that design is there. So ultimately they attribute to the Creator God. But historically he says, the Aquinas, one of the saints, accepted conventional saint, he told, if someone has its own willpower, he can change this. But vehemently other ones told, no, God is 100%. Human being has no willpower. No can interpret terms and conditions. So therefore, it is heretic like. But Aquinas came out with a very nice constructive idea. If you all accept the will can do something, then education can discipline the people. That is the thesis he presented. Ultimately, all the, according to the historical all the big shots discussed and accepted Aquinas without rejecting him from this thing. He says, so why don't consider each and everyone has a will. So with that he started to teach the people. He says, under such circumstances, you can develop certain amount of the healthy the shame and the healthy fear, or moral shame and the moral fear. So then the God will be very happy with you. You will be a nice citizen and real devotee. So therefore, be educated. And when and where you have the chance, give a chance to the moral shame and the moral fame, and therefore keep the mind always restrained kind of thing. And therefore, ultimately, he became the father of education in the Western psychology, Western history. And when the time come, in about 200 to 250 years back, first time Buddhist literature went to Germany, and Schopenhauer, Arthur Schopenhauer, studied them. And while studying, he coined an idea. He says Aquinas is correct. Each and everyone is having a will. But bad thing is, each and every will is evil. It is ill will. First time when he was telling whole people, everyone denounced him, telling he is nihilist. He is going against the grain. So therefore, Schopenhauer was a very decent person. He told, will is there, that human beings do not know how to use it. They use it only for the bad of him or her. So according to the yesterday's talk, any will come into surface out of desire, out of conceit, out of egoism. Any will to manifest, these three prapancha must be there, tanha, mana, ditti. If there is no prapancha, you will never grab all, no will necessary, the natural law, natural flow will go. But whenever you are doing purposefully to show it off, emphasize that emphatic power, the motivation, coming nowhere but due to your desire, but due to your conceit, but due to your egoistic idea. So therefore, everyone is having that. Therefore, Schopenhauer clearly mentioned each and every will is evil. And it was a landmine for the philosophical development. Ultimately, Nietzsche, he came and reconfirmed, reiterated, and ultimately these two couples, the Arthur Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, first time presented Sabbe Sankhara Dukkha. It is for the Eastern people, it is a well accepted fact. Whatever you do, leading to infliction, leading to anicca, leading to flux, transient nature. So therefore, under deep meditative states, or with the blessings of mindfulness, the concentration, you get the chance not to perform any will, not to perform any volitional activity, not to perform any fabrication, just be there. That is the only contribution you can do to cut through the vijnana from the surface level to go into the very deep layer. So that is simply, one can say, doing nothing. What you have to do the best is do nothing. That is the worst thing we don't know. We are very active. We can do rock and roll dance and break dance and this music, that music and all. We are specialists. But you ask someone to just be, that is the worst thing. That is the worst punishment. And for example, you see, when you are getting a capital punishment, if you have been killed, then another one, and if the jury is going to say you have to be hanged to death or kind of thing. I don't know, I have never experienced it, I am not a judge or I am not a criminal. But what happens is, before the punishment happened, they put it to the dark room for 7 days. And they start completely the purging, and whole body become completely selfless. Because they don't know, the criminal can't live in the dark room doing nothing. That is more than a capital punishment. Because the mind has nothing to do, he will see again and again the crime he has done. He will see 7 days time he is going to deheaded. So that is the situation. But if a meditator is going to get a dark place, silent and all the kind of thing, what about that? You will see what a blessing, because we are, after 1 year only we are going to get 1 7-day retreat, and there we are expecting the darkness, and you sit and wait, that is the best for you get. Because of that, the Buddha says, you are learning this art, reduce as much as possible external distractions, and when the mind becomes calm and quiet, do away with any volitional activity. Do away with any willful activity. Don't introduce any aniccan, dukkhan, anattang, asubha, nothing. Any addition, the consciousness will find the grounding, find the footing. And ultimately you will think, instead of looking nothing, what about thinking about my past merits and qualities of the Buddha? But the Buddha says all these things are nothing but the trick of the mind, trick of the consciousness. So therefore, if it is uncontrollable, you will do these kind of thing to get kind of establishment and orientation. But you must understand, one day you must learn this Sabba Sankhara Samatha. Sabba Sankhara Samatha means all the volitional activities, all the willful activities, you must let them calm down. You can't do it, but you can let it happen. So therefore, when you are going into the deep layers of the consciousness, the volition, the sankhara, has many different manifestations, different types of manifestation, and each and everyone, lucky enough, in our books, grafted, put into the graph, and in the map, it indicated this is what it happens. So therefore, if you are carefully learning, carefully studying, these things are available. And the second thing is, it is not a good collection of information for you to write a PhD thesis. It is not to be happy with telling that I know all the kind of things, but exactly applying the appropriate technology when the meditation is calmed down, that is completely a coincidence. When and where it happens, you will be a different person. So, not the same person getting out of the meditation. You can see how much you can go into deep. More and more you go into the deep, you must always facilitate that meditation with the kind of a mindset. And simply it says letting go. Let goism. It says don't claim anything. Don't assume anything. Just see the inclination happens. Just see the delight you develop. Or fear. Or uncertainty, or sleepiness, all these things are not yours. If you are going to assume them, you are the one to suffer. But the Buddha has given a complete license, netang mama neto hamasmi nameso atta. This is not me, not mine, not myself. So therefore, when and where the mind falls calm and quiet, instead of contemplating, instead of giving complicated meditative objects, you must always try to relinquish it to a already available primary object. That is also indicating the final emancipation. You are getting the distance from the object, but the mindfulness never shaken. Mindfulness will continue. And kind of a concentration also continue. That is not the conventional samatha concentration. It's a kind of momentary concentration, which has the potential to survive through all the layers of all the levels of consciousness. So when it is happening, you will get amazed the capacity the human mind is having. Under such a troubled situation, still the mindfulness continues. Still the concentration continues, but you will never second it, you will never appreciate it, because you have a kind of a frame. The concentration must be like that. The mindfulness be like that. You have a fixed frame. You have a permanent notion, and that will be smashed off. That is not what happens. That is not your permanent notion is not the one going to establish. Instead you see the functional mindfulness, the functional kind of concentration is happening. You never appreciate it. Only you appreciate by listening and by contemplating, by preparedness. When and where you appreciate, immediately the results are there. So therefore, when you go deep layers, it is in the sense, not that yogis are not going into that deep layers. Most of them, they are reached it, but they either get frightened or try to grab hold thinking it is me, it is mine, or something contemplating going happen. So contemplation is happening. So therefore you have to learn the art. Whenever the meditation is going to take the upper hand, just put it into the autopiloting and let it happen. And that is the best letting go. Instead of try to take the situation under control, helm under your hand, and that is not the way. Specifically the Vipassana, when it is happening, you have to trust. You have to have the faith on the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha. Let the meditation take place, take the upper hand or take the autopiloting, but your vigilance, your diligence must be ever sharp, ever immediate, ever present. Whatever it happens, so that is how you evolve, or your likings and disliking will be reshuffled, or your personality will be rejuvenated, and you will be ready for the next moment, whatever it may be. Otherwise, you are always expecting a kind of a frame, and next moment like be that, next year life must be like that, and your expectations are there. They are all nothing but the projections of the mind. So therefore, be here and now, see things as they are, and letting go, and disclaiming all what is happening. Your near and dear one may not be happy, but the Buddha will be happy. But the Dhamma will be happy. But the Sangha will be happy. So you will be merging with them as far as you are learning this art. So therefore, with the help of this story of the materiality, the story of the feelings, story of the perception, of course without that very difficult to develop this talk. With the help of them only, you can go into the deep layers, but don't think, just like it, Ananta Lakkana Sutta, first day you will understand the materiality, second day you will understand the feeling, third day consciousness, and fourth day the volition line. They are happening in the multidimensional way. It's happening in the three-dimensional way, but theoretically or literally, this is the only way we can communicate. But don't believe this is happening in a sequential order. At least you must understand three personalities, at least some are more engaged with the feelings. So, they have some more closeness to the feeling. Some are more close with the perception, some are with the volition. So each and everyone, very interesting. For the sake of theory is concerned, listening is concerned, but you must be prepared what is happening under your very nose. What is happening, you must be ready to tackle. And then the assurance is there, whatever arising, if you can tackle, it amount to tackling everything. If you are a kind of a hedonic, feelingful person, feelings will manifest, and by tackling that, you will get master for all the mental factors. If you are a kind of a person with the perception, the labeling and images and epithets and examples and all the kind of thing, and if that is the case happening, if you tackle it, you master everything. And if you are a person with the volitional fabrication and future plans and kind of thing, that will happen, and you must understand that is your personality trait. By tackling that, you will be tackling the whole mental situation. So therefore, even though we are sitting under one roof, our disentanglement is according to our entanglement. But there is a pattern, that is why the Buddha is explaining. So theoretically, that is the only way we can communicate. I hope anyway it is arousing the interest and the motivation and will to work further. And when you are working in such a diligent way and with the mindful way, one day you will strike. One day you will coincide with the proper situation and the proper instructions, and the electric thing will happen. So I hope today's talk also helpful for that kind of a revelation. Thank you very much for listening.